Hi to everybody listening. Just give us a few moments whilst my co-hosts call in, and we'll be right with you. So I believe we're connected to Matt.
Good morning and afternoon.
Or
even having me on.
Or whatever it is you are in the world.
Exactly. Morning in our case.
Yeah, morning in your case. 5 o'clock here in sunny Manchester. So, Matt, you win the gold medal for the first of the three co-hosts to join us.
It's my computer science degree in action.
Oh, that must be it. So Roger and Scott are telling me that they've joined, but that they're not in. What did you do differently, Matt?
There's the little call button at the bottom to click.
Okay, I believe we've got Scott.
There we go. Yep.
There we go, Scott. And I believe we've got Roger.
Hello, can you hear me?
Certainly can.
Brilliant. Marvellous.
Cool, thank you, guys. So we'll give it another, another 3 or 4 minutes till we get going anyway, to get people a chance to get set up on the app and things if they've not used it before. So just bear with us whilst we allow that to happen. I see that we've got a few people joining us, which is great. Matt and Scott, are you both in Portland?
I am. So it is cloudy and rainy in Portland, Oregon.
Really? And it's sunny and bright in Manchester, UK. So that makes a nice change.
It's usually about the same, I think, right? Matt, you're down in Palo Alto, right? Yeah, I'm in Palo Alto, California.
Okay. How are things there?
Also a bit cloudy. Yeah, we've it's generally sunny and warm here, but we've had a little bit of extra weather this week.
Okay, cool. Just give people a couple more minutes. Can see a couple more people just coming in now, joining on the audio. Thanks for bearing with us, everybody. Roger, how are things up in Bury? Not too far away from where I am, but enough to make a difference.
No, equally sunny, actually.
Crikey, we are doing well.
We did have some frost this morning. It dropped below zero last night, which was a bit unseasonal. But yeah, it's. I took the dogs out at lunchtime, and it was a glorious walk. Actually, really nice.
Good. Okay, can just see another couple of people have entered. So I'll just wait another minute or so. I think people are just getting used to this Podbean system. We're just getting used to it ourselves, so it's only natural. Give it till 5 past.
Sounds good. Is there any way for participants to ask questions?
Yeah, so they can just put them straight into the chat field. So everybody that's listening, they should be able to see an input your message screen. If you do have any questions, just pop them straight into there at any time, and I'll make sure we pose those questions to Roger, Matt, or Scott as we go along. And then we'll do another Q&A at the end for if anybody has any. Or if anyone would like to call in, just let me know, and I can actually bring you in so you can speak to the guys directly, which is a cool little feature. So I can just see another 2 or 3 people have entered, which is fantastic. So like I say, yeah, Matt, exactly where you've put that message. That's where we want the questions. Always leading by example, aren't you, Matt?
Doing what I can.
It's appreciated. Okay, so I think let's get going. So thank you everyone for joining us for our second ever live podcast through Podbean. So we are, of course, here for Giant Talk, which is the world's first OKR podcast. And joining me today, I've got Roger, who is the founder of There Be Giants, which is, of course, who I work for as well. And we have Matt and Scott from Coan, and I'm sure either any new listeners or long-time listeners of the show will be well aware by now that Coan very kindly sponsor the podcast. So it's fantastic to have Matt and Scott join us today. So welcome, everyone.
Hey there.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So we are going to actually start doing these live podcasts monthly between ourselves and Coan. So there'll always be at least somebody from There Be Giants, at least somebody from Coan, and probably a few other guests who we rotate through the series as well. If you do have any ideas of really specific issues you'd like us to address on the live podcast, please do just let us know. We're always happy to address those ideas. But just keep on tuning into the LinkedIn and the emails and things to watch out for where they're going to be. But they'll basically be the middle of the month every month. So today we're going to be talking about the future of work. I'm sure everybody is aware we are going through probably the most interesting time for work, well, certainly in modern history, I would say. And it's thrown up a lot of questions, and there's a lot of areas that need addressing and people need to start thinking about. But before we dive into that, Roger, can you kick us off just with a really quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, sure, no problem, Lawrence. So, as you said, I founded There Be Giants. We're nearly coming up for our 10th birthday. Actually, it comes on the 16th of June.
Oh wow!
And we became focused on OKRs about 5 years ago, and have really found that they have made a massive difference to the clients that we've worked with, both in terms of performance of the business, performance of teams, individual performance, level of alignment, engagement, and such like. We work all over the world with clients in multiple sectors, and it's been great work and continues to be great work as well. I thoroughly enjoy it, and the clients seem to get a lot from it too.
Absolutely. And I've certainly thoroughly enjoyed my 18 months coming up to 2 years with There Be Giants as well. So I can definitely second that.
Good. Glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, this is being recorded.
Exactly.
Matt, Scott, can you guys just quickly introduce yourselves and then tell us all about Coan?
Yeah, I'm Matt Tucker, the co-founder and CEO of Coan. Coan is a platform for helping companies and teams have a better and simple approach to actually implementing OKRs, from the planning process through living with your goals, checking in on progress, and then even to rating and creating a continual learning loop. And we built Coan to be particularly well suited for remote workers, which is helpful in this crazy environment that we're all living in, and looking forward to chatting more about that. I previously co-founded a collaboration company called Jive Software.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.
And
Scott?
Yeah, Scott Campbell here, head of go-to-market operations for Coan, co-founder, and been with the company for almost a year now. So we're relatively new to the organization. Working with our clients, we've got well over 200 clients around the globe that are using Coan successfully to manage their OKRs and goals across their enterprise. I've been in the tech industry for about 27 years now, so thrilled to be a part of Coan and thrilled to be associated with There Be Giants.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. So that's a really quick intro to who we all are. Well, actually, I didn't talk about myself, but guys, you hear me on the podcast every single week, so hopefully you know who I am by now. Roger's thinking it's about time he stopped talking about himself.
Lips are sealed.
Okay, so this podcast is about the future of work, as we said, but let's just sort of ground ourselves for a second here. 3 months ago, what did the world of work look like, Roger?
Well, I mean, certainly in terms of the way that we worked, we were a fairly mobile team, but we had, we did have an office that we tended to gravitate back to on a fairly regular basis. But fortunately, I think we were lucky because we did have the tools in place to work more remotely if we needed to. But yeah, a lot of travel, lot of office time. Yeah, I would say that's pretty much how it looked actually.
And what about for our clients? Traditionally, what were we seeing?
Yeah, well, we were seeing pretty much office-based working. Whenever we went to work with our clients, when we did projects with clients, it would always be on site. And typically those that perhaps maybe did work remotely were asked to come into the office to work on to participate in the workshops that we were running. And so everything was just sort of office focused, definitely.
And Matt, were you seeing a similar thing? I don't know if you can tell for your clients where and how they're working, but certainly through the conversations you were having, did it still feel like a pretty traditional setup of office-based work?
Yeah, generally speaking, I think there's a reason it's called future work. These trends, none of these trends have been new, and we've all been talking about them as, we see these things coming, and there's companies experimenting with it, and every organization, is becoming more remote workers. People are having more flexibility. Certainly, our customer base, which tends to embrace some of these trends a little bit early, and we were seeing a lot of that. But it was also a little bit business as usual. Recession was maybe coming, but nobody was sure when. And we were on planes a lot, just like our customers. So it was, it was all that stuff. Maybe that's coming in the future, and we're starting to experiment with it. But it's also a little bit business as usual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one of the things that we've seen really, and you touched on it there, Matt, is people were starting to do remote working from home, et cetera, fully remote offices, fully remote setups. But I guess, Scott, what coronavirus has done is just forced us all into the same position, right? And everybody now has to be a trendsetter one way or another.
Absolutely. I think, as Matt referenced, everybody's been experimenting with this in the past, and they've been forced into actually implementing it in reality, and struggling with it, right? I think a lot of organizations are having difficulty figuring out, what the operating rhythm of the organization is. How do they communicate and collaborate in an offline remote work environment? And certainly we've got a lot of tools at our disposal. I know that I've spent more time on Zoom meetings in the last couple of weeks than I would like, care to admit. Slack, and asynchronous communication tools are fantastic, but most organizations are really, struggling with how do you connect with your coworkers? How do you share information that's appropriate? How do you get recognized for the work you're doing? And how do you, create an atmosphere of accountability as well is something that I believe most organizations are struggling with.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I think worldwide we're now reaching a point where the novelty's kind of worn off for people as well, and people are certainly having to think, actually, this could go on 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. How do we start to build some of those things that Scott was just talking about, Roger, so that we get past this novelty factor?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about the novelty factor, because I was reading a newspaper article a couple of weeks ago saying that collectively, after about 6 weeks, we were, a lot of people were having a crash around that point. And it was because that novelty factor was wearing off. And it's not in the sense of, I'm getting bored of it. It's a sense of actually the adrenaline is ebbing down because the change is becoming the norm. And I know a lot of people that were really struggling a couple of weeks ago, and thinking, when's this going to finish? Where's the end of it all? But in terms of what we need to do for our people, I think the first thing that we need to do for our people, and we can't forget that that there are some very, very basic needs which are being potentially challenged here for our people, and these are the needs of safety and security. So before we can start doing anything more than that, we have to make sure that they are feeling looked after and that they have what they need to feel secure. Okay, that may sound a bit altruistic, but it absolutely, you won't get a great deal of high performance out of them, or any performance for that matter, if they're still feeling under threat. So you need to make sure that that's the case. And then we can when that's taken care of, we need to then think about, actually, well, what are the social needs and how are we making sure that those are still being met? And this is where meeting social needs is important for collaboration. You've got teams that are all based in the office can go and just have a quick chat over a coffee, or go for lunch or something like that, and the conversation and the communication just happens organically. I think what's really interesting, and this is a conversation that you and I and the rest of our team had only just a few days ago, that when I asked the question, do you feel like we are actually functioning better as a team now? Are we communicating better as a team? Everybody said yes, didn't they?
Yeah, emphatically so.
Yeah, exactly. Which is ironic, considering, well, I haven't seen you since March, and I not face to face, and I hadn't seen the rest of the team since February. And I never, ever, I'll hold my hands up and say, I never thought I would actually say that. But what I put it down to is, and this may sound a bit stilted and a bit, and a bit forced, but we make time for regular communication, don't we? And I think
daily.
Exactly, and that has made the world of difference. Instead of just expecting it to happen around the office. And from that has come greater communication. So, I'd love to have some sort of, secret formula that I could share with everyone. But I'm afraid it's a bit of a no shit Sherlock answer, that I think that fundamentally, once you've made sure that everybody's feeling safe and secure, then it's about planning the communication. First and foremost, setting up some really good habits around it. Really good habits.
Okay, so what's OKRs got to do with all of this then? We're talking about the future of work, which is a fantastically broad subject, but this is an OKR podcast, right? So let's just rein it in a little bit, and maybe Matt, you can take the lead here on just explaining how we can utilize OKRs at a time where we are now.
Yeah, there was and ripping a little bit on that, now we're all forced to suddenly live in this new world. One of the areas that we spent a bunch of time researching was, before the whole COVID crisis hit, was what are the biggest companies out there that are remote only? And, generally speaking, it was 500 people, 700 people. There weren't cases of thousands or tens of thousands of person organizations that were remote only. And now suddenly there are, and everybody's living with it. But one of the things to learn from those organizations that have been doing remote only for a while is, what are the practices that they put in place? Things like what you just mentioned, that making very structured time for communication, having a cadence around it. But one of those really critical practices is being ultra clear about the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and writing them down. And not only doing that, but having a methodology around it so that it becomes something that people can depend on, and so that it can guide their work with more autonomy. Because command and control and looking over everybody's shoulder is still a bad idea when you're working in offices. It doesn't work at all when everybody's remote. And that's really the power of OKRs, is this becomes the company-wide, for the team all the way to the company, way of defining, these are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We're going to be ultra clear about how we're going to measure progress against them. And now that unleashes everybody to, still you need to be checking in, still you need to have that cadence of evaluating progress, but it enables people to work autonomously and to have more purpose in what they're knowing, and knowing that they're making an impact.
Mm. That's really interesting. Roger, Scott, do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Not to drill too far down into the accountability part and recognition for work that's been accomplished by individuals, but I think it's all about feeling connected around the company's goals. So OKRs, just provide a fantastic methodology for that, especially in a remote environment. People just don't naturally know exactly what to work on, and if they're not continually reminded and drawn back into the company's objectives that are clearly outlined, then they'll go back to doing what they normally do. And that's not that they're lazy or don't know what to work on. It's just the lack of focus may not be as palpable in a virtual environment or remote work environment.
Absolutely. Okay, Roger, I'm going to ask you to make a prediction for us then. In 6 months' time, are we going to be back to exactly where we were 3 months ago, social distance allowing, and restrictions being lifted allowing, or are we actually going to see a shift in working habits and practices?
I believe that we will see a shift, not across the board. I think some people really want to go back to the way things were quite quickly. But I think a lot of organizations will wake up to the fact, if only driven by commercial motivation, when they realize actually perhaps they don't need to be paying the rents on all the real estate that they've got.
Yeah.
And they can cut back on that. But I think this, in many ways, the COVID pandemic has been a proof of concept, perhaps, for remote working, and it's proven that actually, it can work. It genuinely can work, but you have to flex and you have to shift. And if there's, I think about the managers and the managers that perhaps have maybe stood in the way of really promoting and championing remote working in the past. And my observations from my experience has been that that's been predominantly down to a lack of trust. And all of a sudden, any managers that are micromanagers or wanting to watch people closely, they are suddenly probably feeling very, very challenged by this situation, and they either have to find a way of shifting themselves, or they have to find something else to do, because this reality is there's no choice. We've got to face up to it for at least the short term. But in terms of how things will look in about 6 months' time, I think there'll be enlightened businesses that will embrace the changes that this, or the opportunities that this has presented for us, and I think there will be major ways in the way that businesses approach planning as well for the future. I think this whole situation creates a big question mark and challenges the way that businesses have approached strategy and planning as well.
Yeah, Roger, so go for it, Matt.
I was just going to ask, there have been quite a few news stories in the US about bosses panic buying spyware, worried about whether their employees can possibly be productive remote. I don't know if there have been as many stories in the UK, but
I've not heard any.
It's quite a series, and this is software that will monitor your keystrokes and take a picture of you every 15 minutes and measure whether you've been in email and what apps you're using. And to your point, Roger, this is not going to work, and that is not going to be successful. There's no way that type of micromanagement is. It never worked before. That kind of extrinsic motivation is not nearly as powerful as the intrinsic motivation you can get from actually trusting people and giving them autonomy. But I think you're on a good point, which is this has accelerated everything, and the coronavirus situation, of course. The genie's out of the bottle to some extent. There's the fear to some level is gone. We've all proven now that we can make remote work actually happen. But I think part of this is it's creating an imperative to shift even faster into being the type of culture and company structure that can work in a remote world, but just in a newer future work world in general, where we do give people more autonomy, where we do use tools like OKRs to imbue work with purpose and clarity.
Nothing motivates us to change more than a common enemy. You see it in wartime, and you see a fantastic innovation happen during wartime. And, you could say that the common enemy that we all share is the virus. And that has forced some incredible innovation and some incredible change. But we unfortunately are creatures that often like to remain in the status quo, should we say, because it's the path of least resistance. But we're capable of some amazing things when we really have to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the listeners has just asked a question in the chat. Unfortunately, your name is just a code. So unless you've gone very Elon Musk on us and that is your name, I can't say who asked. But Scott, I'll pose this one to you if that's okay. There is now an additional requirement for communication, like this listener said, and like we mentioned earlier. They're asking, are you assigning certain tools to certain activities? Slack for work communications, you mentioned earlier. But how can you not only utilize tools to maintain the social requirement Roger mentioned earlier, but actually promote everyone else to get on board as well? You guys as business leaders don't have time to ring every single one of your members of staff and speak to them for 15 minutes a day, do you? So how can you use the tools to enhance the communication culture?
Great question. I think companies that have handled this situation, COVID and working remotely well, have been very deliberate about what tools they use for what types of communication, and establishing a deliberate cadence around that. I think being deliberate is really the key word there. Those organizations that have done it again well have been forthright. And I think Roger, you touched on this earlier in terms of setting a regular cadence around communication. But tying that back to the individual tools, I don't, no one tool is going to satisfy all the communication needs and requirements. So Zoom has its place, Slack has its place. We in particular have typically found, especially in physical work environments where 2-3 months ago, the notion of weekly status report was considered to be bureaucratic, overbearing, time consuming, and something that was perhaps viewed by individual contributors as a waste of time. Now we're seeing most organizations move to a situation where they really are embracing the notion of weekly status reports. And you can use a variety of different tools for that, but the embracement of that type of communication and sharing that information between team members has just become paramount. And most organizations are starting to embrace that type of methodology, and what we're hoping, of course, is that over the course of time, and when we go back to a real work environment where people are going back into the office, that continues to be the case, that organizations continue to embrace that as a communication tool. And in the future of work context, as this continues to be the situation where most organizations are going to need to deliberately encourage and in some cases forced to embrace the future of work and remote work, that they continue those types of best practices that they've learned over the last couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. Roger, do you have anything to add on that?
Just looking at the question, I would say, when he asks about tools, just to maybe share the way that we work. And yes, we use Slack for business, and we, if we want to get social, then we usually use WhatsApp, to be honest. And it just creates a bit of demarcation, doesn't it? I think the tools that we tend to make use of are those two. Zoom, like the rest of the world do now, and we use collaboration tools like Trello, and we use tools with clients for things like Group Map and so on. So I think it is about testing and trying out and seeing what works. those tools that I've mentioned, we aren't necessarily the first ones that we tried. We have. I mean, you've been trying a lot for us, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think but I guess the flip side of that is you can overdo it with communication tools. By the time you've got Trello and WhatsApp and Zoom and Slack and Basecamp and all of these different things, at some point it is so overbearing I would turn all of them off.
Someone sent me an invite to join Microsoft Teams, not as a guest for a call, but actually the Teams app recently, and I just refused.
So there's another one.
I can't add another one into the mix. I just don't have the bandwidth for it.
Okay, so thank you for that question in the chat there. If anyone has any others, please do pop it in the chat. Matt, as you brought up the last USA study, I'm going to pose this question to you, which is something that I have seen coming out of the States, which is that a lot of people, and actually in the majority from what I saw, of people said they were willing to take a pay cut to actually be able to continue working from home. I don't know, is this something employers need to be listening to, or is this just kind of some employee pipe dream and people do need to accept that we do need to get back to work at some point?
I think that it's a great question. And one of the interesting things is a lot of this data was coming out from way before the coronavirus crisis. And so there have been studies, what's most important and to feeling engaged at work, what are the most important benefits. And these, this has been a constant conversation over the last decade. Why haven't we been able to move the needle in terms of how connected and engaged people feel at work? And it's all about, do I feel connected to my team? Do I feel connected to my boss? Do I get feedback? Does my work feel purposeful? Do I understand how I'm connected to the company's mission? And there are a bunch of different factors. But one of the really common refrains was, I want more flexibility in how I do work. I want to have flexible hours. I want to be able to work from home sometimes. So this is nothing new. And it's part of why it's been a future of work topic for a long time. Now it's, wow, we've proven that we all did it. We're proving that it works. We're having to change the way that we work a little bit, with more deliberate communication and with OKRs becoming even more critical, for example. But now a lot of people don't want to give it up. And I would say even our employees at Coon, it's probably a mix that a lot of other organizations might see as well, which is there's a few people that really want to get back to the office and work from the office because they're just not feeling productive from home. But the majority, they'll want to come into the office sometimes, but they're actually very productive from home, and they might want to do it half time or the majority of time. And we're also suddenly even more open to hiring people that are fully remote. And that's something that we've done previously, as a company. But all these changes, I think, are typical. And would I accept a pay cut to do it? Maybe. Part of it is, well, if I don't have to live in the Bay Area of California, for example, and I can go to a place that has a more reasonable cost of living and a better lifestyle, perhaps, then I'll do that.
Bay Area's not bad, is it, Roger?
No, it's not bad. And I'm curious, though, would you accept a pay cut to work remotely?
No chance. I'm a Yorkshireman. The word pay cut isn't in my vocabulary. I was just about to come on to how we can start to use, and I was going to shamelessly plug you in here, Roger. Matt said, okay, obviously employers have to start listening now, right? Or they're going to lose their best staff. That seems like the long and short story of it. I was going to ask you how OKRs can be used to get employees to boost this, but Pearson's just put a question in the chat, which I think you can pick up on along the same lines, which is, what are the key elements to make OKRs work well remotely, and how they're different to if you're in the office?
Oh, great question. So more than ever, it's down to the cadence of regular check-in conversations around them.
It's that communication piece again.
Exactly. Now, I'm not saying, I know we said that we talk every day, and we don't discuss OKRs every day. In fact, we do them every week. And I think that, discussing progress and confidence more frequently than that could be kind of really overdoing it. But I think once a week, and I can tell you personally, we've actually altered our cycles as well, because we'd taken our 12-month objectives and reframed those down as 6-month objectives, and we'd taken our 3-month objectives and reframed those down as 2 months now. So we're working on 2-month cycles, and boy, has that been so much more brought so much more focus. And I'm blocking time out in my diary to make sure that I'm working on the activities that will drive the OKRs, because it's very easy to get blown off course with other really important stuff like business development and so on and so forth, but you've got to make the time for them. So yeah, I think you can look at changing the cadences. It is about getting the really good check-in routines and making sure that communication is there. But then it's also about leveraging the tools that you've got. And unashamed plug for Koan, because we use it. I love that when you've done when we've all done our reflections in ahead of the check-in conversations that we do on the Monday mornings. We've done the reflections ahead of that. Me as the the manager, I suppose,
the big bad boss,
the big bad boss. Yes, being able to just to see what people are saying about where they're up to with certain things and what their reflections are on the week, and see that and be able to acknowledge that, be able to make comments against it and so on. And I just find leveraging the tools is super useful. It really is. And I think I think it's down to looking at your cycles. So what cycles are your OKRs working to? It's about the frequency of check-in, and it's about leveraging the tools to make sure that those, you get even more value from the communication as well.
Yeah, just to add a couple of points there, I think the reflections that you mentioned, Roger, I think, in Koan, for example, you can provide feedback on those, right? Everyone can provide feedback on everybody's in their team. But I think it's really important, especially when working remotely, that the feedback you provide is really quite earnest, and you're honest and true in how you're feeding back to people, and maybe picking up with another conversation if it needs to take place, because social interaction, human interaction is all about seeing body language of how people feel, and being able to react to it in the office. And you can't do that. And that is part of OKRs, because it's part of culture and it's part of feedback, and it's part of just human responsiveness, basically. So if people are having an off week where they're not making progress on their OKRs, they need to be honest about it in the check-ins and the reflections, but also people need to be sympathetic and see what they can do to help. And really, you've got to have some sort of transparent system to make that happen well. Let's face it, an Excel spreadsheet is not going to help you convey that you're having a shit week, whereas there are other tools out there to help on that. Scott, do you have anything that you'd like to add for Pearson on that question?
Yeah, and thank you for that. I would love to get TBG's input on this as well. But we typically see a common mistake when deploying the OKR methodology is that organizations only have managers or VPs or directors of the organization report on the status of the key results. They're the ones that are responsible for updating the metrics and their current confidence ratings and so on. And we believe even that in a physical, everybody in the office work environment, not a great way to go, because it's not involving the key stakeholders, the people that are actually doing the work and contributing to successfully achieving those objectives and key results. So in the Koan, not to shamelessly plug our product, but I guess I will. In the Koan context, we certainly recommend that the contributor, we call them contributors to key results, are involved every week in rating their confidence level around key results as well, and providing those comments in addition to that weekly status report, or what we call the weekly reflection. And so by involving the individual contributors that are involved in actually doing the hard work to achieve the OKRs, you do inject that notion of ownership, autonomy, recognition for the work that they're doing, and ultimately you're getting much better alignment throughout the organization. And if you only limit it to the managers or directors within the organization, you only get one lens on how the organization is performing. Is that Roger, Lawrence, are those kind of mistakes or things you see when you go into work with clients?
Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Yeah, I've seen that happen. I've seen it. There's be easy mistakes that have been made.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the mistakes that we see a lot as well are and this is very true working remotely as well, the senior teams having lots and lots and lots of conversations over Zoom and whatever, especially during a time of crisis, which hopefully we will be moving out of, and expecting that everybody else just somehow knows by some sort of strange osmosis what's happened in those Zoom calls, and not being transparent and not telling everybody. So, all hands meetings where you're updating everybody on the strategy and movements of the organization are really, really important as well, even more so when working remotely, because you can't just overhear a conversation that you might have overheard before. Okay, so Roger, you discussed earlier kind of about how we've pivoted business a little bit, and our thoughts for moving forwards as well. We even had the conversation this morning. Matt, what's your current thoughts on what you're going to do with Coan moving forward when all of this is over? And they come out and say, right, everybody can return to their offices. Is it going to be a phone call that Monday morning telling everyone to be in by 9 a.m.? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no. Scott and I were on a Zoom call with a bunch of other portfolio companies from one of our lead investors last Friday. And this is a big topic of conversation is, all right, what's the plan? Stay-at-home orders are slowly being lifted around the world and across the United States, depending on the specific location. So, all right, what is this going to look like? Do we wear masks while we're in the office? And do we have to move our desks further apart? Can we even fit everybody into the office if we were all jam-packed and still meet health guidelines? And it was kind of all over the map. Some of the interesting data points were a lot of companies that either they just got lucky and their lease was ending, or if they made the much riskier and difficult decision of, hey, we're going to break our leases because we just can't afford this. But generally speaking, everybody's perspective was, this is going to change how we're thinking about office space forever. Maybe we're going to have smaller offices. Maybe we're not going to have offices at all. And we're hiring more people that are remote in less expensive locations. For us, it's going to be kind of the pragmatic middle. We're still going to have an office. We're going to have it be open, meeting the U.S. CDC guidelines. Might not be able to have a coffee maker for a while, for example. But for our culture, there's a set of people that do want to be in the office and feel more productive there. So we want to have an office environment for them. We've always been a remote-friendly company. In the sense that I live in a different state than where our core office is, and we have other employees in the same situation. Now we're going to be even more a remote first organization, and that's probably pretty typical for what a lot of people are facing going forward.
Absolutely.
To add on to that, what's going to be interesting about this particular situation is that one policy is not going to be able to apply to all the employees. It is going to be very individualistic, and I think we're going to have to open it up to people making their own choices as to how quickly they return to work, how often they're actually in the office, and there are some very real kind of scenarios where individuals may just prefer to work from home, but there are also real scenarios where they have particular health issues, or they're just more sensitive to the overall concern globally around potentially getting COVID, and they're frankly more nervous about the situation. And I think we've got to be accommodating to those individual circumstances, and that's a different way of approaching things than the command and control structure from before. Sorry, Roger. Go ahead.
I think you make a really, really good point there, Scott. I think it's easy if you're if you've got a team where everybody can work remotely and nobody's got issues, in the home, which makes it an unproductive environment in which to work. Then it's easy to assume that everybody else is in the same boat, and that's not the case. Yeah. That's not the case at all. You've got some who you say could be quite anxious for very good reason about exposing themselves to any risk of catching the virus, and also conversely, you've got those that actually really could do with getting back to the office because for whatever reason their domestic situation is really not conducive to working from home. Fortunately, I only have two needy dogs to bother with it. But I can imagine if I had, rather loud children knocking around and such like, that could make things very, very different. And I do have friends who, have boys that are like 2 and 3 years old, and he's trying to drive a product team whilst and do all this scrumming and sprinting whilst he's got 2 and 3 year olds causing mayhem. This is an easy thing to do, but so I think when this comes back to the office, I think we have to be prepared to accommodate those that want to get back to the office, but we also at the same time have to make allowances for those that are equally productive and performing at home as well.
I'm going to make a prediction about the future.
Oh yes, I love it.
So my one prediction about the future, 5-10 years from now, I think all of this is going to actually fundamentally change how we think about our home layouts and experiences. And so this idea of maybe there's just a kitchen table to do work on when you're occasionally doing some extra work from home. No way. This is going to fundamentally shift our expectations of, I need a place to be productive at home, and I'm going to set things up in a way and look at the apartment I'm renting or house I'm going to purchase with all of that in mind. I think it's going to shift behaviors in a pretty deep way.
Do you think it will start to shift, actually who people work for and where they're based? For example, I'm in the UK. Is there anything stopping me at this moment getting a job in New York, but not actually moving there?
Probably the time zones might not be that great to work with, but physically there's nothing stopping you.
It'd be interesting to see if that does start to take shape. I was chatting to somebody yesterday who's living in Vancouver, working for a German company, and is working at making it work just fine. But that would be interesting to see as well. So, Matt, are you saying our next podcast should be on the future of home then?
Perhaps. But I think the question you just asked gets right back to that imperative of, okay, and when people can work remotely and the genie is now out of the bottle, that becomes even more the imperative for organizations to do this right and to create the work environments that people want to be a part of and that attract remote workers. And so right back to the theme of, all right, we better get smart about how to do things like use OKRs to create these better work environments and actually embrace autonomy and the ability for people to be productive from home and work with purpose. That's an imperative now.
Yeah, absolutely. Roger, I'm going to pose this question to you because you've been mentioned in person in the comment. So Jen's asked that you mentioned that us at TBG have moved to 2-month OKRs on our shortest cadence. Mm-hmm. Would you advise getting even shorter than that, in certain industries? Jen's mentioned retail there, for example.
In all honesty, probably not. I think if I understand the question, I'm guessing that what Jen's driving at there is, like retail. She gives a retail as an example. Retail, hopefully when all the shops reopen again, retail is often quite a fast-paced sector to be in. And I think maybe the measures which you need to use there are probably more akin to health metrics or KPIs, which you're keeping a close track on. Because we've got to remember that OKRs are about usually driving change and transformation. And my concern is if you shorten it down to say a month, for instance, you haven't really got much time to actually crack on with the work, because you'll be evaluating and then resetting OKRs, literally within a couple of weeks of having set them previously. So I think that could get a little bit all consuming, really.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm interested, just to end on a note that's been brought up a couple of times, which is about culture, really. And we know it's vital for OKRs. We've been over this before, but culture for me is something that the organization lives and breathes. How can employers make sure that culture still is living and still is breathing and still is what they want it to be in a remote working scenario? How can that happen? Scott, maybe you can pick up on that.
That's a tough question. I was hoping you weren't going to pick me. Culture is a tough thing to define, and I think it means different things to a lot of different people. The camaraderie that you have in an office is palpable. Laughter over a cup of coffee, and I don't know, just there's a different vibe about it, and replicating that in a remote work environment, I think it's going to be challenging, to be honest. I'm not sure you're going to get back to a scenario where you have you can directly replicate Wednesday evening drinks at the local pub. That's just obviously not going to be much more challenging. What we've done at Cohen, which I think is really neat, and the employees have really loved it, is actually creating remote happy hours. So usually on Wednesdays, actually at 4:30, we'll set up a happy hour, and then we have different activities. There are all sorts of different apps that are popping up for creating, joint activities online using Zoom or a variety of different applications. We do Pictionary, we do trivia, there's an idea to do poker night where everybody can play poker together, and it's fun. I mean, we have.
I'll see you on Wednesday night.
Yeah, that'd be great. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think those are great tips, and they're totally fun. And you have to add some structure to what might have been sort of automatic, like we get that energy from being together just in the office, and maybe over a cup of coffee randomly. Now it takes structure, and it takes some thought to add. Is it the Wednesday virtual happy hour? Is it some other practice? I usually think of culture as simply being the behaviors that you really live with as a company, and what you say is important. And so whether that's OKRs, like as a leader, I care enough to write down what's important, and therefore enable my team to get their best work done, or whether it's we care enough about connecting with one another that we'll take a moment to share non-work things with one another, and have that open feedback and some fun. It just takes a bit more structure and thoughtfulness.
Roger, close us out.
Wow.
What's your thoughts?
What do you want, a song? Closing thoughts. Oh God, what I would say is, this period has been really traumatic for millions, if not billions, of people around the world, and I have friends who have lost people, and I know the amount of loss that has been experienced is certainly not to be overlooked, forgotten about, trivialized, or anything like that. However, that I do genuinely believe that there is so much good that's going to come out of this, and I think we're glimpsing in the conversation that we've had over the past hour, I think we're glimpsing at some of the real benefits that we can seize and we can continue to build on from this point onwards. Like I said, when our backs are against the wall and we've all got a common enemy, we can do some amazing things. And I think we a lot of people have shifted in a very, very short space of time, and that's not something that you often see. And that's why I think this period will be looked back on not just for the loss, which should never be forgotten, but also for how it's going to move us, how it will help us move forward, how it will help us transform in the way that we work, in the way that we function as teams and organizations.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a very nice closing, considering I put you on the spot there. So I'm impressed.
Well, there you go.
It doesn't look like we've got any more questions coming into the chat. But of course, you guys can always reach us on LinkedIn. It's Roger Longden, Matt Tucker, Scott Campbell, Lawrence Walsh, or find us on koan.co or therebegiants.com and join us and have a chat, because we're always happy to talk to you about any of this stuff. Hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Like I say, this is the first of a monthly live podcast series that we're going to be doing. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues. It's great to have more listeners, as many people engage with it as possible. If you are enjoying the podcast, please go to your OKR platform of choice and give it a 5-star review, because to be completely honest, it's actually in my OKRs for this 2 months to get some more reviews. So if you could do that, you'd be really helping me out. But no, in all seriousness, stay well, stay safe, and thank you for listening, and look forward to talking to you next time. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Okay. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.